I never thought owning a backyard pool in a quiet suburban neighborhood would turn into the biggest headache of my life. But that was before I met the infamous HOA Karen. Everyone around here knows her. She's the type who peers through her blinds, writing down license plates, and measuring grass height with a ruler. But her kids, they were an even bigger problem. Almost every morning, I'd find wet footprints on my patio and candy wrappers floating in the pool. No matter how many times I asked her politely to keep them out, she just shrugged it off or said, "Kids will be kids." At first, I tried to be patient. I even installed a taller fence, thinking it might keep them from sneaking in. But somehow, they always found a way squeezing through gaps or climbing over with makeshift ladders. Every day felt like I was fighting a losing battle. And when I confronted Karen again, she turned the tables, accusing me of being unfriendly and saying that a community pool should be shared. The kicker was when she claimed the HOA rules meant my pool was practically public property. That's when I knew things were only going to get worse. After weeks of frustration and worrying about liability if one of her kids got hurt, I made a decision. I had the pool drained and filled in, leaving nothing but a flat patch of dirt behind my house. I thought this would finally bring peace, but instead, it sparked a storm I never expected. The next afternoon, Karen stood in front of my driveway, phone in hand, yelling that I'd destroyed community amenities. And she'd already called the cops. As I watched the patrol car slowly roll up to my curb, I realized this was just the beginning, and there was no telling how far she'd go to get her revenge. The officer stepped out of the car slowly, adjusting his sunglasses as he looked between me and Karen, who was still flailing her arms like she was leading a protest. I could already tell he'd been dragged into something he wasn't thrilled about. Karen rushed toward him, going off about how I stole a neighborhood feature and that her kids were emotionally devastated by the loss of the pool. The officer raised an eyebrow and glanced at me, clearly waiting for my side. Calmly explained that it was a private pool, built with my own money, on my own land, and that her kids had been trespassing more than once. He seemed to understand, but Karen wasn't done. She pulled out a folder filled with printouts and photos, including one of her kids in the pool from weeks ago, trying to use it as proof that it was a shared space. She even waved around some old HOA guideline papers, twisting the wording to fit her argument. I knew the rules well enough to know she was bluffing, but the way she spoke, so confident and loud, made even the officer pause for a second. Neighbors started peeking out from windows, and one couple stepped onto their porch to see what was going on. That only fueled Karen's fire. She turned to them, shouting that I was ruining the spirit of the neighborhood and acting selfish. But what really caught my attention was how some of the neighbors didn't seem surprised by any of it. One woman even shook her head like she'd seen this play out before. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my pool. There was something deeper going on with Karen, something that had other neighbors quietly staying out of her way. And now I was directly in her crosshairs, with no idea how far she'd go to win. After the officer left clearly deciding this wasn't worth escalating, Karen stormed off, mumbling something about taking this to the board. I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I was wrong. That evening, a notice appeared taped to my front door. It wasn't from the police or the city. It was from the HOA. A formal complaint had been filed against me for unauthorized landscaping modifications and removal of a shared recreational feature. I stared at the paper, stunned. How could they label my private pool as a community resource when it was clearly on my property? The thing is, our HOA isn't exactly known for being organized or fair. Karen had been on the board before and still had friends in it. She's the type who knows just enough about the rules to twist them her way. I started digging through my paperwork, permits, blueprints, everything from when I had the pool installed years ago. All of it checked out. But this wasn't just a rulebook battle anymore. It was personal. Meanwhile, I started hearing quiet knocks on my door. Neighbors I barely spoke to before began opening up. One told me Karen had once tried to get their backyard swing set removed, calling it an eyesore. Another said she reported their dog for barking when they didn't even own a dog. It was like the whole neighborhood had stories but were too scared to push back. Now that I had, it felt like they were silently hoping I'd stand my ground. Then, out of nowhere, my security camera system sent me an alert. Motion detected after midnight. I checked the footage and froze. Someone had walked into my backyard, stood near where the pool used to be, and then disappeared behind the shed. The figure was too blurry to ID, but I had a sinking feeling this wasn't just a coincidence. Every day after that felt like walking on thin ice. The HOA board meetings turned cold and tense whenever I showed up, with Karen sitting front and center, her eyes fixed on me like a hawk. She brought up the pool issue again and again, each time trying to paint me as the neighborhood villain. But what shook me the most was how some neighbors who had seemed friendly before suddenly avoided my gaze or hurried past, as if afraid to be caught on my side. The sense of isolation was creeping in fast. Then the nighttime visits didn't stop. A few more motion alerts came through my phone. Always late at night. Always brief shadows slipping past my fence. I started staying up, watching the cameras, heart pounding every time something moved. It wasn't just about the pool. Anymore it felt like someone was trying to intimidate me, maybe even send a message. I wondered if Karen's influence ran deeper than I realized. And if I was stepping into a fight that wasn't just about property lines or HOA rules. One evening, as a storm rolled in, I heard a knock at my front door. No one ever knocked. I hesitated before opening it, but no one was there, just a small envelope taped to the frame. Inside was a handwritten note. Stop this now, or things get worse. No signature, no explanation. My stomach twisted. Was this a warning from Karen, or someone else entirely? The next morning, I found my garden gate unlatched and muddy footprints leading into my yard. The tension was suffocating. I realized I couldn't back down, but every step I took seemed to push the situation further. Karen was watching. The neighbors were whispering, and the threats, silent or not, were closing in. What started as a simple pool dispute was turning into something much bigger. And I was right in the middle of it. Just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense, a new twist hit me out of nowhere. One afternoon, I received a call from the HOA manager, someone I hadn't spoken to directly before. Their tone was oddly cautious, almost hesitant. They told me there had been an official vote by the board, and somehow the entire pool area was being declared a common area under new HOA regulations. That meant, according to them, I no longer had exclusive rights to that space even though the pool was built years ago, on my property and paid for entirely by me. I was stunned. It felt like a power play straight out of a soap opera, but with real consequences. Suddenly, my property wasn't mine anymore. At least in the eyes of the HOA, and if I didn't comply, there could be fines, legal action, or worse. But that wasn't the worst part. The manager slipped in a warning. Several neighbors had already reported seeing unfamiliar people hanging around the old pool site late at night, strangers who didn't live on the street. Someone was using this conflict as a cover to push their own agenda. And I had no idea who or why. On top of that, Karen wasn't hiding anymore. She showed up at my door one evening, smiling in that way that doesn't reach the eyes, telling me that the community had spoken and that resisting would only make things harder for me. Her kids, who once sneaked in quietly, now openly played near the yard. Daring me to say something, I felt cornered, with the HOA breathing down my neck, neighbors growing suspicious, and mysterious figures lurking in the shadows. What had started as a fight over trespassing kids and a backyard pool was spiraling into something I couldn't control. I knew I had to dig deeper to find out what was really going on, and fast, before things got even worse. After hearing the manager's words, I realized this wasn't just a simple neighborhood quarrel, it was part of something much bigger. Karen had used her influence to stir up trouble, but there was a larger threat looming. Outside investors quietly trying to take over the community. It explained the strangers lurking around and the sudden push to change HOA rules. I felt a new responsibility, not just to protect my property, but to watch out for my neighbors too. I decided to share what I'd learned with a few trusted neighbors. Slowly, the community started to come together, exchanging information and concerns. We organized meetings and reached out to legal advisors to better understand our rights and how to prevent any unwanted takeovers. It was clear that staying silent or divided only made us vulnerable. As for Karen, the board asked her to step down temporarily while they investigated her actions. It wasn't a clean ending, but at least the tension eased and the neighborhood began to heal. I restored my backyard, this time with a secure fence and signs clearly stating private property, making it impossible for anyone to sneak in again. Looking back, the whole experience taught me a lot about standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable or risky. It reminded me that property disputes can quickly become personal and complicated, especially in close-knit communities with strong personalities. Most importantly, it showed how important it is to stay informed, connected, and ready to face challenges together. So, if you're dealing with difficult neighbors or HOA conflicts, don't underestimate the power of community and the need to protect your rights calmly but firmly. Sometimes, a simple backyard pool can reveal much deeper stories. You never know when you might find yourself right in the middle of one.